All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Thank y'all for joining. Just a heads up, we are recording this so that we can view this after our session today. For those that may have missed it, it will also be posted on the YouTube chat channel for our group. All right, first and foremost, welcome. So if you are new, welcome to the San Antonio Fabric Plus user group. We're excited to have you. And if you are returning, we are just as excited to have you back and look forward to really learning from everybody. Today's agenda, quick introduction for our Pug leaders, how to get involved with the San Antonio Pug group, reviews on Fabric and Power BI updates, and we're going to share our topic is sharing smarter Power BI service, best practices for report builders and end use. And of course, answer any questions that you may have along with closing comments. All right, I am Chris Alman and I'll be presenting today. I'm one of the co-leaders here for our user group. And I'm a data analytics manager here at Guadalupe Valley Electric Co-op. And we also have Antonio with us. Antonio, do you want to give a little shout out?
Yes, hello everybody. Antonio Ramsey. I'm a director of internal audit with the San Antonio Water System.
Awesome, great to have you with us today. We also have Lawrence, Ray-Ann, and Jason, who unfortunately cannot make it today. But there are also some of our other co-leaders working behind the scenes. All right. How can you get involved with us? So we are growing and we are working on improving our outreach. And if you want to join us, we have a number of different channels you can be a part of. We have our Meetup group, LinkedIn, our Microsoft Fabric community, and then our YouTube channel where we have our past sessions recorded for reviewing whenever you need. And I will send out this PowerPoint, which has all the links to all of our different ways of getting involved. So I'll send that out at the end of the meeting. All right, so about us and save the date. So whether you're part of the team or you're flying solo, this session is for you. Join us for a collaborative guided deep dive into Power BI, Microsoft Fabric, and related technologies. We're not just limited to one or two topics. We're really trying to make it as broad and relatable as possible so that we can learn and grow with each other. We do meet the last Wednesday of every month at 12 p.m. And there is a link for meetup information, which takes us to our meetup webpage. All right, community impact. So we are looking for future speakers, and we have a couple that are in the works. We're just confirming final details. So hopefully in the next couple sessions, we'll have a few new faces to guide us and to learn from. But in the meantime, if you're interested in volunteering, there is a form for you to fill out. That link will be sent out again with the PowerPoint slide. But based on our previous surveys, we have a number of topics that we have covered that y'all have mentioned that you're interested in learning about, such as DAX, DataViz, Fabric, dashboard design. All of those have been covered. The event streams and real-time analytics we haven't gotten to yet, but that is on the agenda for in the future. And we have covered data modeling and case studies, and then Data Factory we have not done yet as well. That is on the agenda or in the near future. And then today we're going to talk a little bit about administration and governance. So we are hitting all the topics that are of interest, and we are due for a new survey, which has been sent out. So a big shout out to Antonio for getting that taken care of and curating that. It's been, so far we've had a great response, and we just want to get as much input from y'all as possible. And I'll send that link out here at the end of the meeting. All right, so very quickly, some Power BI updates. The security labels for Power BI desktop files are now out. So now it's no longer security labels that are in Power BI service, they're now applying it to desktop so that if you have different sensitivity labels for your data, it's now going to be applied to desktop, and only those specific folks can have access to that data or a subset of that data, however it's been designed or defined. They're continuing to add more for visual calculations. Lots of updates there. And then sparklines. I didn't know this, but sparklines were still in preview. They've been in preview since early 2021, and now they're GA. So now they've got full support. Just took 4 years for that. And then org apps. Org apps are now available in the mobile version, and that's a very good add-on. So they're continuing to invest in the org apps. So nice to see that added feature. And then this is actually really cool. Network Graph by PowerViz on the App Store. So you're able to see different ways to visualize different groupings and clusters like neural networks in a visual. That's something that we have not had as a standard, can't think of the word, as a native visual within Power BI. And then they're also continuing to invest and expand Copilot. Copilot, you can now chat with your data, and also Copilot is now embedded in reports and portals for websites. And there's a link there. There's a specific separate article on that to elaborate. So lots of things going on. Very cool updates. All right, just jumping straight into it. Sharing Smarter, Power BI service, best practices for report builders and end users. So what I'm going to do before we begin, I want to jump into the survey results. I want to take a quick look at what everyone's answers were. Just give me a moment while we switch gears, switch screens. All right. Okay, so the first question, and guys, this is really trying to make this as interactive as possible. So if at any point you have any questions, or if there's something you just want to comment or elaborate, or if you have a situation that you're coming across or have heard about, feel free to chime in. This is definitely not supposed to be a one way I speak the whole time. Would definitely love that back and forth conversation. To start off with our first question, do you give your business users access to your workspace to view production reports? 80% said yes, and 20% said no. Very interesting. So a lot of us are given workspace access. We're going to talk about the pros and cons to that in today's session. All right, the next question. Do you currently use Power BI apps to share content with end users? 60% said yes, and 40% said no. So interesting change there. We actually dropped it from 80% to workspace access to 60% for apps. So it sounds like we got a combination of where people are not using apps and maybe just using workspaces as the main way of sharing content. So we'll talk about that too. I want to pause on the survey results there. When we get to the next couple questions, then or that part in the presentation, then I'll revisit the questions here. So we're going to start with just kind of a lay of the landscape with what we're going to accomplish for today. So for our session takeaways, we're going to understand the differences between a viewer, a member, and contributor roles, and when to use each, because each has very distinct and specific purposes. We're going to learn best practices for organizing and publishing reports via apps, shared links, and workspaces, and then explore how to reduce confusion and improve user adoption by tailoring access and visibility. All right, so just a little bit about just verbiage. We hear about workspaces and what workspaces are, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So this sounds very silly, but I know when I first started this in our world, we didn't make this connection, or we didn't set up our workspaces appropriately. So this is the Microsoft definition of what a workspace is. A workspace is a place to collaborate with colleagues to create collections of dashboards, reports, semantic models, and paginated reports. So all the artifacts you create in Power BI. It makes sense. It's a space to work, not a space to share or consume. It's a space to work. And that was something that we didn't make that connection. Very, very subtle difference, but has a very big impact, which we paid the price for. And I'll explain that a little bit more with our learning journey and what we went through and the struggles. This is just a picture from Microsoft's website of a workspace and what a workspace looks like. And this is something that we're all probably familiar with if you've been in the Microsoft environment for Power BI. This is something, if you're a report developer, you're all very familiar with all of this, how all of this looks. All right, so what can workspaces do? Well, you can create workspace roles and you can define those roles depending on what those needs are. You can also create a contact list so that if there is an issue or if you need to reach out to anyone that needs to know important information related to that specific workspace, you can send them a quick update or an email based on that contact list for each workspace. You can also create template apps and you can share semantic models. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a few of the features. I did mention roles. So what are roles? Well, not everyone who has access to a workspace is going to need to be able to get in there and manipulate or create artifacts, delete artifacts. Or you may not even want them to be able to create or delete artifacts. You may just want them to be able to view or read, depending on what that situation is. So that's where roles are coming into play. They let you manage who can do what in a workspace so that you can collaborate. Workspaces also allow you to assign roles to either individuals, user groups, such as your security groups, or Microsoft 365 groups, and distribution lists. This is what it looks like when you are assigning a role. Depending on what the situation is and what their needs are, it is recommended that you give them the least amount of permissions possible, or that's necessary. So, for example, if you have someone that wants to just view or read or have read access to an artifact, there's no need to give them admin access to where they have full-blown privileges. Just give them the least amount of access that they need. That's just following best practice. And that's assuming that you're a workspace administrator or you have an admin tenant privileges. Not everyone can give permissions to workspaces. There is I won't say very long list, but there are a lot of permissions within the workspace that you can give depending on what the role is. I do have a link that takes you to the different permission levels and what each different role has access to for within the workspace. And that'll be on the resource page at the very end of the meeting. So you can see admin, of course, admin can do everything. And then as a member, a member can do everything other than allow contributors to update apps, add or remove users from a workspace, or even update and delete the workspace itself. And then we have a contributor. So that's someone that is not a full-blown member, but they can help contribute to providing new artifacts, updating artifacts, and there's a lot of other privileges that they have access to as a contributor. And then the least amount of permissions is the viewer, and that's where they can view and interact with different items. That's typically going to be your end users. They just want to be able to read the reports or view the reports. All right. And last, as far as just understanding how all of this works, within Power BI service, the point of it, or a large part of it, is to be able to share content and how to consume content. So there's a lot of different ways. You can, of course, copy and share the link. You can create an app and you can distribute the content through the app. You can also integrate through Teams. I don't know if how popular or if that's being used, but there is a Power BI app within Teams, which has been very useful for our organization. Or you can give them direct access to view the report. You can also restrict access to just internal use, or you can create external use permissions through business-to-business processes. Each organization is different and there are just different needs. So you do have that option. You can also embed, print, create subscriptions. You can also share just by downloading PBIX files and handing them off to each other. Don't recommend it, but that is a way, not the best way or a good way. But you can also share via PowerPoint. Power BI is integrated into PowerPoint, which is really cool. Makes you can spice up your presentations with live data. All right. So that was really just kind of a brief overview of workspaces, roles, how to share content. I want to pause right there real quick. Are there any questions about anything that I've covered so far? Or anyone need any clarification? No? All right. Okay, so I'm going to frame this presentation a little bit differently. And this is going to be really kind of a case study about what we here at GVC, what we went through when we first started with our learning or with our data analytics learning curve. We struggled at first with our analytics program. We started back in 21, and we really didn't know what we were doing. Once we had our program set up, we had our Power BI reports out in the wild. We found out that our reports just weren't really cutting it. Our end users were struggling, and we went from, sorry, let me back that up. Our end users were struggling. So initially we were sharing the reports via workspaces or direct links because that's how we thought we were supposed to do it. We assumed that there would be easy navigation to get our content. There wouldn't be we've gone through all the trainings to show everyone how to use it, how Power BI service worked, where to go, the buttons to click. So we were under the impression everything was great, but we found out that our adoption was not as high as we wanted. We had a very slow adoption. We heard back that they couldn't find the report. They didn't know where to go. And we even had instances where they didn't know if that they were looking at the right version or not. So there was just a lot of obstacles and challenges and a lot of difficulty on the end user side, where it just wasn't worth using the reports to a degree. So we came up with a realization that just because you publish content isn't enough structure, clarity, and it's not user-focused. Just publishing content isn't enough. You need structure, clarity, and user-focused design are essential. I need to reword this sentence. So our end user struggled. Then we kind of regrouped and reevaluated. So how do we provide easy access while maintaining governance? Because that was a really big deal. We had a lot of challenges. There was too steep of a learning curve for our end users, as I said before, too difficult to find the reports, and navigating Power BI service was just challenging, especially for our non-computer literate folks, and it resulted in a low adoption rate. So some of the key mistakes that we made that hopefully you can avoid if you're young in your data analytics journey, or so some of the key mistakes that we made during our initial rollout. We didn't do our homework enough where we didn't follow Microsoft documentation. We gave everyone access to workspaces. And just FYI, we are a co-op. So throughout the presentation, if you see co-op, I'm talking about our organization. We also didn't use apps. And then we had permission groups that weren't fully dynamic. They're all manually assigned. And we relied on our consultants to guide us. Well, we found out that they were learning alongside us too. So It was like the blind leading the blind. It just wasn't a good situation. But all of that is fixed, and we're going to talk a little bit about how all of that was done. So just a quick look at some of our bad ways or our old ways of how we had things organized. The first picture on the left, we just created general groups that were manually assigned. Definitely don't recommend that because there's a lot of overhead and upkeep. I'm sure you all are familiar with your organizations that people come and go, especially if you deal in the service industry. There's a lot of churn. Well, that's a lot of people to add and take away for your security groups. Definitely don't recommend it. Go dynamic. And then also for our reports and our workspaces, we are giving individual folks access to different workspaces. Now, the reason we opted not, or we decided not to do this, is because they're viewers, and we decided not to give individual access. But we found out when we're cleaning up and auditing our workspaces that there are people that were added in there for to view maybe one report for a week, test it out, and then we pushed it up to prod. But they were still in there a year later. So that we took care of very quickly. Got all of our workspaces cleaned up, removed all the people that were not developers, and we pushed them up to viewer space access or to report access instead of workspace access. And then another situation we ran into with our user groups is if you look on the right side, I have a couple folks that are highlighted in blue. And another issue we ran into with the assigned groups or assigned memberships for our groups were these folks right here that are highlighted in blue. They're no longer supposed to be in this group. They had job title changes, or they transferred to another department, but they're still retaining the original security permissions. We don't want that. So if they're no longer in that department, their permissions should change with their new role. Well, our security groups weren't following along with those changes. They were still retaining those old permissions. So they weren't dynamic, but we fixed it. So in a nutshell, we used our workspaces incorrectly. They're supposed to be collaborative dev environments for dashboards, reports, and semantic models, as I said before. And they're not for end user consumption. They're supposed to be for developers only, hence a space to work, workspaces. And this is what our current workspace looks like for one of our workspaces, where it's organized. We have our reports, we have our semantic models, we have dashboards and other artifacts, and we designed it for clarity. So, as I said, our mistake was the co-op, which is our organization. They had direct access to the workspaces. There was way too much noise. It was hard to navigate, and it became confusing. We originally started out in Tableau, and then we switched from Tableau to Power BI. So that added to the confusion with our how to navigate workspaces was just too much. It was too much at once. So now our workspaces, this is what it looked like with the workspaces. So we're all familiar with what a workspace looks like. You have all your different options on the left with the different icons. You have your home, your browse, your OneLake, your apps, your monitor. It's too much. Try explaining that to someone that's not familiar with technology, or they didn't grow up with technology. It's just going to be information overload. So how do we fix that? Well, we created apps for our report consumers. It is a cleaner interface, and it is easier navigating, or it has easier navigation. One of the challenges we ran into was that we had to rebuild our bookmarks and our subscriptions. So keep that in mind that we switched our bookmark and subscriptions from the report level to the app level. But that was something that we, as a business, made the decision that it was worth helping recreate all of those. It was a headache, but definitely it was worth it. In addition, apps offer customization, separation between dev and end user layers, and then workspace access is limited strictly to report devs via enter ID groups. The neat thing with apps is you can really customize them to where you can add additional links to not just your Power BI service reports, but external links. If you have an Excel sheet that maybe county needs to have access to or just wants to reference, you can keep them in that same environment in the app so they're not having to navigate between different windows or different tabs. And we've had very positive response with that. And in addition, we're able to link in other reports to our app that may not necessarily be housed in that app. For example, we have reports catalog where all of our apps the user can click on the reports catalog link and it'll take them to the reports catalog where they can search for the different reports. Or for us, we're big on if there's a request, the end user knows where in line they are for having their request fulfilled, for having a report built, etc. So we put all of that out in the open. And then we also have an FAQs. So these are all different features that where if we had everything on the workspace level, we'd have to recreate all of these different artifacts over and over, or one for each individual workspace. However, the app allows us to have that one artifact and just use that link and embed it into the app. So there's a lot less overhead and maintenance. And it's been, we've had a phenomenal feedback on it, saying that it's a lot easier to navigate and they have a lot more at their fingertips. This is what it looked like before. So this was the end user experience. As you can tell, there's a lot to choose from. The presentation is just not there. There's a lot left to be desired. It just doesn't look good. So good, nice, pretty, confusing, information overload. So if you're an end user, think about it this way. Which one would you rather interact with? Option A or option B? Now, there's always exceptions to the rules. I'm not saying this is the one way and the only way. This is just how we are doing it and what we've learned based off of our experiences. And yes, there's always exceptions for those one-offs and onesies and twosies reports that just, there's always an exception. And then we ended up making an app for each of our workspaces and really emphasized on the look and the user experience, and essentially trying to make it more of like an application instead of just a report. So I've gone over a lot on the apps, and are there any questions on the app? Does anyone have any information or insights on how they're sharing their reports and how they're doing it differently, and maybe some lessons learned or some challenges they're facing? All right, Thomas, I saw you were typing there. I'll give you a few minutes, and Sean. Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Well, if y'all think of anything, feel free to throw in the chat or just chime in. There's Go ahead and move on to the next topic. We're going to talk about permissions, security, and usability. But before we do that, I'm going to hop back to our survey results. Okay, so question number 3 of our survey. Do you use Microsoft Entra ID, which was formerly Azure Active Directory, security groups to manage access to Power BI artifacts, such as reports, datasets, or apps? 40% said no, 20% yes, and 20% for planning on using them, and 20% say, what is Microsoft Entra? All right. Oops, don't want to do that one. Jump there yet. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about. If you're not using it or you're planning on using it, I highly recommend that you begin using it as soon as possible if you're able to. One of the great things and blessings that we have is we have a great relationship with our IT department where they allow us to create our intergroups. So initially, when we first started this, now this was a double-edged sword because we were able to create it. We also made the mistake where our security groups were too broad. They weren't dynamic. We were still learning how those groups worked, or even just really what our structure needed to be for it to work with our organization and our processes. So we ended up creating manual viewer groups for our report viewers, and we had other groups for our report builders, and we would just create different departments for the report viewers and report builders, etc. You can see how that can become very convoluted very quickly, one for each department, especially if you have a large organization with many departments. It's not manageable and it's not very scalable, especially with the turnover and manually assigning those folks. It just becomes too much to be responsible for, and there's no way we can keep up with who's still in that role without actually going and reviewing employee logs, etc. So we ended up with a messy and cluttered group structure. So what do we do? So we actually went back and we rebuilt our groups from scratch. We just totally dumped well, we didn't dump them because people still need permission, but we ended up creating brand new groups with a brand new structure and going through all of our roles for all of our viewers and grouping them based on what the specific need was or that process was. So now instead of just having a department-based, we have it as a role-based, because there are different subsets or different groups within those departments that where maybe you need your managers to view certain reports. And then you may have supervisors that need to see other reports, but not everything a manager sees. And then of course you have your first line workers where they may only need to see the least amount of reports. And so it gave us the opportunity to be able to define and get really granular with who needs permission to see what, without having to worry about, okay, is he a worker in this department? Or is he a supervisor? What is he doing? We got rid of all of that. And that was a massive undertaking, but one of the best things we ever did. So we rebuilt them from scratch using our job roles. They're now fully dynamic. Now we have folks that are coming online where we'll get an email saying, hey, Mary just joined. She's our newest customer service rep. It's like, okay, that's great. She needs access to Power BI report. She's already got it because her role is as a customer service rep, and we have that role defined. So by the time we get to it to confirm, just because they're not, that supervisor's not familiar with how it works. They just know they have someone new, they need access to the report, and so they reach out to us. Well, we already know that she already has access to it based on her role. So by the time we get to it, she's already up and using reports. There's no issues. We're already behind or way ahead of it, and it's fantastic. The maintenance has been minimal now that everything's been set up. So the front work or doing the work on the front end, absolutely a ton of work. There's no way around it. But once you get all of that established, it is so much more smooth sailing. It's so much less work moving on. The only changes or the only thing that we have to worry about are job changes and if those roles change and creating a new group. So now they're fully dynamic. There's less overhead. It's easier to update when the roles change, and then someone that takes over that role, someone leaves a manager role and that new person will inherit those permissions for the previous manager, and you don't have to go back and reassign those permissions to those reports. So like, well, what did Joe have access to? Did he use this report? Did he use that report? You don't have to worry about all that. It's already done. It's automatic. All right. So we designed for clarity. This is now how we are currently designing our reports or our different AD groups or intergroups now, not AD. This is, for example, our GIS department. We are a electric co-op utility, so we do have a geographic information system group, And in this case, we decided just to bucket our GIS teams, they're a smaller team, into one general group, and it's dynamic. So it's based on the department. So anyone that's coming or going from the GIS group, our rule will automatically update to add them or take them away, as long as they have that minimum requirement of they're in the GIS role. We also have other roles where we created for our executive managers. And so we have for example, this one is our executive manager of operations. So we created a role for each of our execs where based on their job title, and then we also included their administrative assistant, because in our world, if their administrative assistant needs to also have access to their reports. And then we're able to define, well, this is our manager of operations within the operations department. So we're able to specify that this is this one role for this one person and their administration executive. So that's going to fluctuate depending on if it changes, which hopefully it won't. There's no plan on our exec leaving anytime soon or our admin. So that one's been pretty static, which has been fantastic. But take it if you have other manager roles or any other role that can fluctuate. So, all right. So now we also had a situation where it became too much to add every group to every the specific reports. We decided to create a one overall group or one large umbrella for an overall viewer group, where there are some reports where our organization says, all right, here's a report and we want the whole organization to have access to it. Well, instead of having to add in, I think at this point we're over 100 different excuse me, different enter ID groups. Instead of having to input each of those 100 groups into that permission, to give them permission for those small group, or I'm fumbling over my words. Let me back up. Instead of having to give permissions to each of those reports to over 100 different groups, we created one umbrella group one time for an all report viewer group. And so now if we have a report that needs to, where the whole group needs to have access to that report, we can just type in that all report viewers permission group, and now everyone has access to it. So you can take that and you can create a different group for, let's say, just your execs or just a specific department. It's just really how you want to structure it. There's a lot of different ways, but it does make things a lot easier to permission. And this is a quick look at some of the different groups that we have and how we define them. And it's a lot easier to read and keep up with. And these are all dynamic. So very little maintenance overhead at this point. All right, so final thoughts, I'm going to jump the gun there. I'm going to go ahead and I'll finish that out, then wrap up with the last two slides. So for Power BI success requires, you need governance and clarity, role-based access, and user-centric design. In our lessons, we end up with a smoother experience for developers and business users alike, and our adoption has significantly increased. So we have happy customers, which is fantastic, and they're using our reports, and they're helping drive business, making data-driven decisions, which is ultimately our goal. So, all right, let's go and review the last two questions. So I pull those up here. Okay, so how would you describe the current structure of your Power BI workspace? 40% said there's a clear separation between development and production. And then 20% each for mixed without a clear separation, each team managing their own structure, and then not sure. So there's all across the board, there isn't, we're kind of everywhere. For those of you that are in that 20% bucket, I would recommend in looking at making that clear separation between development and production reports. And that way you have less hands in the cookie jar and less potential issues that could come up with your production reports potentially getting well, something happening to them that shouldn't. So, all right, question number 5. So what's the biggest challenge when it comes to managing access and sharing content in Power BI service? So different means, dashboards, programming languages, and online help. There you go. That word cloud didn't really, it was a little confusing. Okay, so not familiar with the different means. Maybe name meanings. Accessing online help, circular frustrating, especially with respect to programming languages. Yeah, absolutely can agree with that. And then sharing with non-Power BI users and keeping dashboards secure. So definitely a lot of those are very common challenges, and those are actually some really good topics that we can address potentially for future sessions as well. So make a note of that. Especially the keeping dashboards secure and sharing with non-Power BI users, accessing online help. So, all right, good stuff. Thank you guys for those submissions. Really good stuff. All right, I'm going to hop back into the slide for the last slide to show resources. Excuse me. And I'm going to throw the PowerPoint slide into the chat. But I did put on the additional resources. See if that'll. Let's add. It's not letting me upload. I'll need to. Okay, I guess Teams is blocking me from uploading. But anyways, these are the links for the additional resources, which help explain in Microsoft Words what a workspace is, what the different roles are for workspaces, different ways to share and collaborate. And then there is a great article by Radicad on best ways to share Power BI reports using apps and why it's recommended by Microsoft that is the way to consume the different artifacts. And then also, what are the apps? And I didn't touch on it, but there's a new version of an app called an org app. There's a link in there to describe what the org app is. That one is still in preview, and they are still making adjustments or improvements on it. So just keep that in mind before making that decision to release it to an organization. There are some restrictions. Whenever we were creating our apps, the reason we didn't go down the org app route was because we're really emphasizing subscriptions, and org apps did not have subscriptions or bookmarks at the time it was released. And so we went ahead and moved forward with the original Workspace app instead. So, all right. Well, we got about 10 minutes left. Are there any questions? Thank you, Cosette. Appreciate it. So, if you have anything, I'll hang on here for a couple minutes. Otherwise, thank y'all guys. Appreciate you. And I'll send out this PowerPoint slide with all of the links so that you can access it, as well as upload the recording to our YouTube channel. In the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful day and hope to see y'all next month. Bye, guys.
I thought it went well, Chris.
Thank you. Minus losing my voice.
Yeah, it happens.
So not a very many folks, but overall, I don't know. I think we're getting there. I don't know. What are your thoughts on where we're at?
I think it's good. It's to me, the biggest thing is obviously you need to drive content that people want to tune in for and everything like that. And when we get the surveys and you're finding speakers, it's kind of hard because like this is what they're saying they want, but then they don't tune in. So it's like, okay, is it, what is the miss of why people aren't, signing up, or if they do sign up, because I think what do we have, like 20 something?
27 when I last looked, which would have been 4 of us, so 23.
Yeah. And we had what at the total? I didn't count it.
We had 10 consistently, and then it jumped up to 11 briefly.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's not bad, or roughly around 50% and everything. Especially for a free event that, I do know that Michael Contreras, that he's from Saws and everything. So I will definitely, so a little bit of why I was kind of reaching out and said that I had done that is, so we had a new director of data and analytics come aboard a little over a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago. And he's wanting to really put in a lot of places, build out better data governance, things like that, get a better understanding of our data, plus also wanting to expand into the Microsoft world on Fabric and Power BI and stuff. We're still going to keep our footprint in Tableau, but definitely wanting to get more people involved in the other spaces. So that's why, and he's also created a weekly office hours and everything. So that's why I was like, hey guys, I'm sorry it's late notice, but there is this group, and we have one on Wednesday, stuff like that. And so I can have more conversations maybe with him about, hey, what do you think at your level would be good things to have, or what we can do to kind of drive not only people within Sols, but other things, what he's seen, because he's worked at HEB, USAA, and things like that. So
yeah,
he came actually, so he worked at HEB, then, or USAA, HEB, then he went to Vegas and was with Slick Deals.
I've heard of them.
They're one of those like bidding companies where it's all like have an item and you can, bid up to like get it and stuff like that. Yeah, it's funny.
Okay.
I gave him a hard time. I was like, I never have heard of Slick Deals. And then all of a sudden you came here and I started getting emails for Slick Deals.
Oh, that's not by accident.
Yeah, I'm all like, come on, dude. Well, it's on my personal account. It wasn't Saws. I'm like, what the heck, dude? Um, but anyways, so he's like had experience of and what he's seen and stuff like that. And I think that in a combination of like, if there is stuff that he can give us, maybe also, since there's about 50 plus in this analytics group, and like I said, they had talked about, wanting to get information about Power BI because the majority of people have always been Tableau users here because that's what we built out on the server. But we're going to start getting Power BI, the higher Power BI licenses, for people. And so, like I said, there may be an opportunity to kind of draw more people in here and everything. So, and then I don't know if there's other groups that we can kind of also maybe reach out to be like, I know like Randolph Brooks, they're a Microsoft shop. I don't know if anybody else off the top of my head I can't think of that's a Microsoft shop that would be using Fabric and Power BI and want those things. But again, those people that I knew of, I've sent information to. I saw that they've joined our LinkedIn group, but I also haven't seen them interact with a meeting. So I guess like that's the hardest point is how do you engage them from being on LinkedIn to actually coming to a monthly meeting?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? Um, yeah, so awesome. Thank you for putting that out there. Anything we can get definitely helps. There is kind of just staying with your new manager. Is he familiar with Power BI? Did he come from a Microsoft shop, or is he just is he learning as well?
I think as far as the Fabric Power BI, he's more familiar with that. I know that he's wanting to bring us over to more because like he wants to start using Teams, like we've been using WebEx, and he wants to have everything within the Microsoft area so that we can create that data lake and have better, feeds within it. Because right now our data is kind of over a lot of different systems, and like he said, like he's just kind of like he's like that's not a good setup if we want to really be able to harness our data. So like I said,
Yeah.
I know he has a kind of an overarching. I don't know how granular he got into each environment.
Yeah, that's kind of, we were Tableau, and then we got, I won't say priced out. It just Tableau, whenever they made that pricing structure change, Microsoft was a better solution, and we're already a Microsoft shop, so it made sense just to shift over. We've had a positive experience with it. Our learning struggles, which you got a little preview of what we went through,
Yeah,
but going for what we need for our analytics point, we weren't able to fully meet with Tableau.
yeah. And I think and it'd be interesting. So within our audit group here, I'm pretty much the only high level Tableau user, power user, and everything. The other people we've sent through training and done a lot of stuff with that, but nobody's ever really engaged or they've tried and it just isn't as intuitive. And so if we start expanding into Power BI, it would be interesting to see if they would be more engaged with it and utilize it more.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a double-edged sword. There is a learning curve, and that was something that we saw very early on was Tableau was a lot more intuitive, as you said, where Power BI, it's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of analyzing or reading the reports or even using the reports. The We have one of our analysts on the power supply side where she hates Power BI, but Tableau, she loves it because it's that drag and drop, just dump a SQL query in, and she's got her not measure, but I forgot what they call it, and whatever that pill is that she creates, dimension
Oh,
or
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, but it doesn't work that way. But what I will say from our end, having switched to the Microsoft or to Power BI, our data is structured. We have a single source of truth for our tables. It's gone through more validation. We've had more eyes on it because we're forced to, because it's all, you have to have your foundation set up properly for the reports to work. You can't just use flat tables like you do in Tableau. I mean, you could, but it doesn't scale up.
yeah,
So, but what if,
yeah. Oh, sorry, go
so
ahead.
I would say, well, what if as y'all are going through that and you have different, let's say, use cases of, okay, we're trying to do this. Could that be a topic that we talk about? Or if there's other organizations, hey, we're looking at this issue, and then maybe that can be a topic, and then we can, because ideally, I don't want to present every single time.
Oh, I understand. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I can have a conversation with our director and then also the manager in that group and basically ask them they want to kind of utilize that. And then I did send over the screenshot of the topics of interest that are coming up and asked him, hey, is there anything that you would see as, an addition to that? And then also I've started a audit analytics user group here in San Antonio. Again, it's more leaning towards the audit analytics side and everything. But again, there's a group of us with, it's actually, I think we're at 12 organizations. And some of them are Microsoft shops, some of them are, different things like that. So next time we have a meeting, I can ask them, the ones that haven't joined, like, hey, is there anybody that has questions, would like to present, things like that. And again, trying to get them engaged over here as well. And like you said, bring in maybe some use cases or struggles that they've had in topics like that.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. And then what I can do on my end, so there's that one meetup message I got from Benny. Where to go? Yeah, so she had reached out to present, and she was actually on the in the same. She was part of the San Antonio, or not San Antonio, the Power BI and Fabric Summit hosted by Radicad and Microsoft. I was part of that one, presenting for my data flows on that. She did the UX, was it the UX and report design experience. So she's a
Oh, okay.
legit presenter, and she reached out to me. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I can just hit up those presenters that presented topics that we may be interested in and see if they'll present for us, or if they'd be interested in presenting. So can maybe approach it that way.
Yeah, that's a good idea and everything. So, and I'll, like I said,
So,
I'll look around to some more people that I know, and things like that, and see if there's uh, kind of like how there is within audit, where there's people that are wanting to be able to present to build up their confidence, workout, stuff like that, or just to get it where it's like they're wanting to go from free to starting to get paid, and so you have that reference where you can be like, hey, can you give me a reference if somebody calls out and says, was I a good presenter, and things like
yep.
maybe there's people that I can start looking out for that, and either align with this, or if they have specific, like you said, use cases, topics, or something like that, that we can kind of pull back in and everything. So, and then I know my friend in San Angelo that had presented from IntelliVega, he actually has moved on from his company. He actually sold it to the majority of it to his partner, and so I can follow back up with him in his new role, to see if they're still utilizing, and if it's in a different way, because I know that he's really looking into for that new company in his role of bringing in AI and different tools within analytics and stuff like that. So it might be some interesting new use cases that he has that maybe he could present on.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I'm trying to get also my team. I've got a couple guys on the machine learning slash learning the AI in Fabric. So trying to get them to muster up the courage to do a presentation. They're just not that's not their cup of tea.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've been trying to get Fabric here, and I've been able to get pieces of it. There was a continuous assurance project that I did last year, and we're doing another one now. But as we built it out, at first I was like, why don't we just build it in Fabric? And I showed them like everything, and they're like, oh no, no, we have these tools and we have this. So I was like, okay, so we went through, and as I started being like, oh well, I need to do it this, I need to do this, and I need to do this step and stuff. And one of the things that I ended up doing is I had to, obviously with an audit, we have our finding report, and they had me build it again because had our footprint, or we have our footprint in Tableau. So they had me build the monitoring dashboard in Tableau, and it creates a report, and then that report gets sent over to management. And then I needed to save, like, well, when management responds and says, oh no, this isn't an exception, why isn't it? I need to document that for our records. And so I wanted to have a place to document it, but then feed back into the Tableau model, so that we can clear out that exception so it doesn't pop up the next time we run it. So I created a SharePoint list, and I fed that SharePoint list over back into the data store, or data mart that they created, and they were like, oh well, we need to get data factory to feed it from here over to here and stuff.
Yep.
So it's like stuff I've been doing, they've been like, oh well, we need this piece from Fabric, oh we need this piece and everything. So and then, like I said, with the new director coming on board, he's like, yeah, we need a fully step into the Fabric environment and everything. And I've been asking for things like I want to start doing some text analysis and things like that, so I can find themes across our audits. So when we find recommendations, I can link themes that may not be easily seen because they're so siloed, and cut down the silos and stuff like that. So that, because that's actually a requirement now in audit, in our reporting to the audit committee, is that if our audits find themes across the organization, you have to report those themes across the organization. So,
okay.
so I
Yeah,
wanted to,
that makes sense.
yeah, so I wanted to, we haven't had anything set up like that, and everything. So I want to do some text analysis, create a list of themes, maybe like 5 or 6, and then basically feed in the findings, and it says, okay, this is where those themes are.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Fabric would definitely help with that. I'm convinced, especially after FabCon, that just having that. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, sorry. For some reason, my earphones cut out. So
So I was just saying that after FabCon, that I'm more convinced Fabric's the way to go. Just having that one-stop shop, everything's in the one lake, and then you can access it by all the different tools.
yeah, I think I agree with that and everything. Like I said, and then the other thing too in the past that I was like, kind of a proponent of is like, well, Tableau has the nicer dashboard if you really want to get into the fancy things, but things that I've been seeing people come out with, through Maven Analytics, just things like that, it's really being able to expand where it's, because in the past it was like, oh yeah, that's a Power BI dashboard, like you can tell. And now I'm starting to see things where I'm like, wow, that it's very hard to tell the difference now, because people are being able to really get very artistic with the Power BI dashboards like they have in the past with Tableau. So.
Yeah, for sure. They're definitely, Tableau's got the prettier looks, but Power BI, they're catching up.
Yeah. So. All right. Yeah, I will follow back up with you. And like I said, I was looking at the form, and one thing I didn't catch and everything is, I think on one of them we asked how satisfied are with the user group meetings you've attended. We should have had an option that says not attended. Or I should have put an option.
Yeah, 1,000 minutes. All right, well, if I add that now.
Yeah, because like on the other one, how often have you attended a meeting in the past 12 months? None.
Which one? What number is that?
The very first one is how satisfied are you with the user group meetings you've attended? Trying to think too.
I have not attended a meeting yet.
Okay.
Will that work?
Yeah. I was just, like I said, I had not completed it yet. And it's like you create it and you have a blind spot sometimes. And then that's why I was going through. I was like, oh, wait, what happens if somebody hasn't attended one?
Yep, you're right. Okay, that's added.
All right, perfect. All right, that's all I have now. Like I said, I'll follow back up with you as I hear things.
Okay.
Do we have one for next month lined up?
I'll send out the invite, and in the meantime, I'm gonna try and get Benny to see if she can do that. She's coming from Vienna.
Oh, okay.
So as long as she's okay with the time zone difference, which that would put her at about 7 o'clock, or it would be at 7 o'clock local her time.
Yeah. You know what? I'll also reach out to so there's this guy that I know. he does the audit podcast, but he owns the company Green Skies Analytics. Now he wouldn't present, in that space, but he has a lot of contacts that he may be able to point me in a direction of somebody that would present to the group on Power BI or something that they're doing in that realm and everything. We would just have to make sure that it's not too heavy just into audit. It would be something that other people could utilize and just get ideas from. And then, like I said, maybe also Aaron be willing to do it at no cost, since obviously we don't have a budget to pay anybody.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'll reach out to those contacts that I have.
Okay. All right. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much for everything you've done.
All right, no problem. Bye.
See you.